One of the most popular watch releases of 2022 was the craze for the Omega Moonswatch. So let's take a closer look at its release and ultimately find out what it's done for the watch industry. The collaboration between Omega and Swatch on March 26 to create the Omega Moonswatch really came as a surprise and took the watch world by storm. What was released was approximately a $260 watch at retail that featured the iconic Speedmaster case, but now in a bioceramic material and co-branded with the Swatch name. The watch was meant more as a somewhat of a lighthearted collaboration between Omega and Swatch to ultimately attract new eyes and new collectors into the hobby, while also trying to generate a certain amount of marketing buzz for the two brands, which it ultimately did achieve as watch collectors went into a frenzy to ultimately get an allocation. We even had our own luxury bazaar employees, namely Alex, Nick, and Sabina, wait outside for an allocation in the freezing cold to ultimately get one, which they successfully did. But is it really worth it? Well, everybody got it, but Sabina.
I waited 10 hours and I didn't get it. And they had to have like 100 watches, and I was number 76 and they had 74 watches, so I didn't get it. It was a waste of time.
The watch itself retails for about $260. It features a bioceramic case and of course that iconic Speedmaster design with the twisted lug case, as well as it comes with somewhat of a cheap Velcro strap if I'm being entirely honest. Now, while the design is obviously great despite its strap being somewhat of poor quality, overall the watch is meant to be something that is extremely accessible for either new watch collectors or avid watch collectors who just want something a little fun and lighthearted, and I certainly think the Moonswatch definitely achieves that. The watch is powered by a quartz movement, does feature chronograph pushers, although I don't really know if you can use it necessarily as a chronograph itself. And overall, again, at the price point that it's at, I think it is somewhat fair, but I will admit that there are better options out there for a lot cheaper. Now, it started as a fun and inventive collaboration meant to create some marketing buzz, quickly turned into something that showcased the really bad parts of the watch industry, namely the greed and flipper mentality and anything to make a quick buck from people. What we saw was watch collectors scratching and clawing and pushing each other to ultimately just get an allocation of a $260 watch. Out of the gate, the watch hit eBay and Chrono24 for approximately $5,000+, which I doubt anybody actually paid, but it's crazy to think that people actually listed a $260 watch for upwards of $5,000. And even to this day, Omega Moonswatches still aren't easy to get an allocation from, myself personally not even owning one, and I know many watch collectors who simply have tried and tried and tried and just can't get their hands on one, although they are becoming somewhat more accessible. And that's without even mentioning the fact that they still trade over retail because they are so difficult to get. Again, as I mentioned, the watch is a great and very fun collaboration, but I definitely think that there are a lot of great other alternatives out there for a far cheaper price, from brands like Casio, even from Swatch themselves. And so really, is it worth getting this collaboration? I think if you're an avid watch collector and want something that isn't necessarily expensive from a luxurious brand like Omega in collaboration with Swatch, which is slightly more affordable, I think this is definitely a great choice, but again, not the best quartz watch out there for sure. Overall, I think that there's a lot of positives and negatives to take away from the Moonswatch released. Namely, starting with some of the positives are, again, this really fun collaboration between Omega and Swatch, which ultimately at the end of the day created a very accessible watch that brought new fresh eyes to the watch industry and did create a lot of overall buzz for watch collecting, which is great because watch collecting is still very much a niche hobby that is growing and growing at a rapid rate, but again, still very niche overall. I think it's also good for people to see that high-end watches aren't the only end-all be-all, and that you can get great watches at an affordable and accessible price, like for example the Omega Moonswatch or the tons of other quartz variations that you can get for a few $100s. But overall, I think that the launch was overshadowed by the fact that we saw basically human stampedes and people tripping over each other to ultimately get an allocation. And again, showcasing that kind of dark side of watch collecting, the flipping and anything to make a quick overall buck, which just takes away, in my opinion, from the watch collecting experience, especially for somebody who is just entering the hobby and really was enthusiastic about getting an Omega Moonswatch and just simply couldn't get one at retail and got pushed and shoved out of the way along the way. I think another thing that's important to mention is the collaboration between Omega and Swatch, which was very unexpected. At the end of the day, Omega positions itself more so as a luxury brand, whereas Omega is more so of an affordable watch brand. And so these two kind of brands combining to create the Moonswatch was really unexpected overall, especially given the fact that it almost in some respects potentially cheapens the Omega brand. But I don't think that that's the case. I think that this was a really fun collaboration, and I think that they should potentially explore other options and other alternatives, and maybe even potentially, given the success of the Omega Moonswatch and the great marketing buzz it created for both companies, that more brands should ultimately explore collaborations like this. I think overall, if watch brands were to collaborate more and more, what you would get is a better end product for the consumer, and also, at the end of the day, create some fun and spirited releases like we saw with the Omega Moonswatch. We've seen collaborations in the past, namely for example between Breitling and Tudor, to create a number of different movements in which that they both use, and so overall the R&D costs are significantly decreased, and that creates a better product for the consumer for a cheaper price overall if either brand were to just focus and try to do it themselves. And so I think that these collaborations between different watch brands are something to look out for in the future, especially given the buzz that they can create and especially considering the ultimate product that they can achieve. Combining the manpower, reach, and resources of both of these companies to create something that truly will kind of disrupt the watch industry in the same way that the Omega Moonswatch did will ultimately only help the watch industry overall, as it will continue to attract fresh eyes and fresh collectors to a somewhat still niche hobby. Guys, overall, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Omega Moonswatch. Do you own one personally? How do you like it? And of course, are you still looking to potentially get more to the collection? I would love to see, for example, somebody collect a complete set of Omega Moonswatches. That would be pretty cool overall. Guys, let me know down in the comments what you think about the release and of course the actions that followed it. I'd love to get your feedback also in terms of what videos you'd like to see on the Luxury Bazaar YouTube channel, and would really appreciate it if you liked the video, subscribe for more in the future, and of course guys, my name is Marco and I'll see you in the next one.